Okay, so here we are at our Heritage Action Zone newsroom today. Welcome everybody. My name is John Costa and this is Tina Barton, and we are owners here at the Documentary Media Centre, which is on Northampton Street. So we're between Granby Street and Charles Street, so kind of right on the edge of the Heritage Action Zone. And we've been pulling this newsroom together today. So we went to Focus last week. Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, we had a great time. Last Thursday evening, we travelled down to Churchgate, met the fabulous people at Focus, and they initiated us in a couple of activities. So we got to know them a little bit, and we found out a little bit about what they're going to be working on as part of Heritage Action Zone project, which is really, really great, and we're really excited to be sharing that with you throughout the newsroom. But yeah, we've made a little film. We went on a bit of a walkabout with them. It reminded us of the old days, didn't it? Of actually out and about doing lots of stuff. Bothering
members of the public. It wasn't sponsor a dolphin. It's like, you know, how would you improve the High Street? How would you improve Granby Street? How would you improve Churchgate? I think it's really interesting to work with young people like that, particularly the work that we do around heritage and young people trying to get them engaged in it, to see how that develops, as in, you know, them taking literally focuses on Churchgate as well. That charity is actually based there. So to get the young people interested, and hopefully they'll get a shop on Churchgate as well, and they'll be able to do something with it. That's how you change it, isn't it? By giving people ownership of stuff.
Oh, totally. And I think what I took away from we won't give too much away, but what I took away from our time with them on Thursday last week was the fact that how excited they get when they learn a fact or an historical piece of information about a previous use for a building, or who built the architect, or, you know, they actually come alive. I just wish that my history teachers were a little bit like all the people we've met who have told us information about buildings. It's a great way of actually hooking them in, you know, and when they find buildings or realise how many theatres and cinemas the city used to have years ago, and, you know, how we played a really important role in kind of hosiery wear and all of the city's history, they are genuinely interested. And I think that's what I took away. It actually brought a bit of a tear to my eye when they were working out their riddles and actually working out which building the riddles were for. Yeah. So that was really great for me. I really like that.
So anyone who's not come across the Focus charity, will put the link to those guys on Churchgate there into the Facebook comment section shortly. And Tina's going to go back round there and start working on all the social media as we work through the film. So we've got just a short film to play you about that, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about Focus. And then we caught up with James Burkmar, who's the Workspace manager at the LCB depot here in Leicester's Cultural Quarter. And he shared with us a little bit of information about the Cultural Consortium, the design season that's coming up in October, and also that kind of creative industries and maybe the role that cities can play in actually regeneration and the rejuvenation of particular areas. And so we're going to got quite a good interview with James, quite meaty. We've got two 20-minute chunks to play you, which I'm sure you'll enjoy. And then towards the end, we're going to catch up with Eleanor Mckevidy, which was, I think, interesting thing for us to do as well, because we got to go into a building which some of you may be aware of, near the old Matalan shop up that end of Churchgate as you go out of town, the timber frame building, which some of you might think, well, that's a bit of a weird building, a bit of a Toblerone building maybe, bit of a Swiss theme. And it was great to actually have a tour around inside, and we got to have a chat with her, and we'll play you a short film that we did with Eleanor as well, and talk to you a little bit about how you can get involved in the project off the back of that. And really, we want you to participate today, putting any comments in the section. Good to see some people are watching already. But also, the Heritage Action Zone has a survey at the moment. So Tina will also post a link to that, because I think the thing that's really important is whether you're, and it says this on the first page of the survey actually, whether you're a resident of Leicester, a visitor to Leicester, a business owner in Leicester, or you just work in Leicester, everybody's able to have their say, because I think Granby Street in particular is one of those roads that's not owned by a community. It's more about owned by everybody. Everybody has equal access to it. at various times of the day and night as well, over the weekend as well. It becomes a bit of a party zone, and people coming in, but people coming in just for ice cream and, you know, just a night out, not even involving alcohol. So it's a real mix of families and people out enjoying themselves. And then during the day, it's a kind of quite a vibrant business area, lots of different types of shops as well. And really that's where I guess the project comes into its own up until 2024, is to how do we use and allocate some of that £1.5 million from Historic England to make sure that it's getting to the owners, to be able to revamp the area as well, while the City Council alongside that does its job when it comes to, you know, street furniture and kind of improving safety and things like that. So here we go again. This is our second newsroom. Did you enjoy the launch back on the 1st of June?
I thought the launch was fantastic, and I know we're going to play the fantastic film again, which is great. But I just hope those people who have joined us live and will hopefully stumble across this when we put it out after the newsroom on the Facebook page and various other platforms, that they will continue to be interested and be part of this journey that is really going to transform, you know, a well-loved area of the city that people have, like John's just mentioned, lots of connections with, whether that be through memories of childhood, working, playing, visiting, nights out. You know, it would be really great to see that journey and kind of ensure that people take that journey with us to actually find out who, you know, who's benefiting from the funding, what projects are going to be happening, what things are going to be changing in the city centre that you may, you know, recognise on your visits or when you're on your lunch break walking. So it's really, really great. I'm excited about today's newsroom. So I think there's lots and lots of little bits of information that if you are genuinely passionate about this city, you will want to know about and you'll want to keep updated with. So I'm looking forward to the next couple of hours.
Okay, so there we go. We're here for a couple of hours now. We're going to end with Sophie New, who is actually the High Street Heritage Action Zone project manager. So we'll get the latest from her as well, what's going on with the project, maybe what's going on between now and Christmas. And particularly as well, we'll be giving you the date for the next virtual newsroom that we'll be doing in February. And, you know, what can we expect to see up to and over Christmas? Is it going to be one of those things that's still going on behind the scenes, or are people going about their day-to-day business in the city going to be able to see some changes on Granby Street and Churchgate in that period of time, or is it something that's going to start appearing really next summer? Now, I was thinking just before we started as well, I had a quick look through who we'd spoken to in the first newsroom on the 1st of June at the virtual launch, and we met up with Professor Christine White, who's the Deputy Dean of the Arts, Design and Humanities faculty at DMU, and both universities are involved, Leicester University as well as DMU. But she's the chair of the Cultural Consortium. So when we speak to James in a little while as well, the Workspace manager from LCB, he's actually a member of that consortium. So again, we're trying to keep that continuity throughout the newsrooms as we go, talk to different people, different personalities, and what role that they're playing. So that's good. And we'll make sure that we put some links up as well to the previous newsroom, because we don't want anyone to miss out on some of the really interesting conversations we had, and particularly Christine, that was really good. We also spoke to Harsha as well from Focus Charity. She's the Leicesterville project manager there. So you'll see her in the little film that we made. We're going to show you in a little while. No interviews this time, just more a little bit about what their guys were doing when they were out on the high street, as we work towards capturing more footage of them with the newsrooms as we go forward. We also spoke to Louise Fedotov Clements, who's the artistic director at Quad and at the Format International Photography Festival up there in Derby. And she was talking about this longer term photography internship person that they've got, and they're going to be doing some community workshops and stuff. So lots of stuff coming. And that's why I'm saying with Sophie, she'll be able to tell us whether it's something that we're going to start seeing straight away, or whether it's something that's going to start appearing next summer. But we also caught up with Mr. Shea from the Underground Creatives, and he'd worked on making this film with Johnny and Nat at the Sea Creative. And the interesting thing about this, I really like this film, it's about a minute and a half. So we just thought it was a really good way of starting the newsroom again. It's just reminding people some of the content that's out there that they might want to share themselves. You know, if someone says to you, what is the Heritage Action Zone, I think this is a pretty good place to start. Okay, cool. So Tina's going to pop round there now. I'm going to share this film, and let's see whether we can get ourselves rocking and rolling.
The gateways into the heart of the Midlands. A walk of art, a collage, uniting the world in a tapestry of Turkish Art Nouveau, French Gothic, European Renaissance. Our streets diverse like the people who walk them. But don't simply walk past, walk into it. Nostalgia floating into your nostrils like fresh roasted coffee and cocoa aroma, sober and vivid. Hear the beats of the buildings rumble your soul. Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, a place of devotion. Goddesses watch over us, showering inspiration for us to create. Bricks and mortar like scripts from authors tell stories of the glory days gone by. The ghosts of dead poet societies linger behind our walls, and cornerstones carry the weight of our legacy into a brighter tomorrow for us all. We look up and listen to the tales of our great trees connecting Leicester's building roots.
I do like that. I think that's a really great way for us to start the newsroom, just to remind ourselves of some of the great content that's already been made. So well done to Mr. Shea. We've got a really interesting interview that we did with him as well for the first newsroom on the 1st of June. And they often say with these things, you shouldn't work with children and animals. Well, obviously we can't avoid working with children because that's the most important thing. And they're going to play a real key role with a lot of activities and events that we've got over the next couple of years up until 2024. And animals, well, Mr. Shea, was it a parrot? George joined him live during the interview. So you should definitely check that out. That's quite an interesting one when it suddenly appears on his shoulder. And we all just try to pretend that nothing really happened, that the parrot never arrived. So that's good. It's rough and ready with these newsrooms. It all happens, and that's the most important thing. So let's talk about the charity focus to get us started. We did a really interesting interview with Harsha. Like I said, we'll put that up in the link section as well for people to watch from the first newsroom. But we went down last Thursday because they just started to work with someone who's very well known in the creative industries here in Leicester, and that's Keith Allott. Fantastic reputation, excellent for working with young people, and I don't think anybody would disagree with me on that subject. And Keith runs Bad Shoe Films, and he was getting to know these guys again. He'd worked with some of them previously, so he was going down, and we all got involved in playing some games at the beginning, which if you've not worked with young people before, or it's the first time that you do it, it really is an icebreaker when you suddenly get this amount of energy, and we can feed off of that as well. So it's great. So thank you for Harsha Acharya, who's the Leicesterville project manager down there, for inviting us along to capture some footage and to just tell the guys what we were up to as well. Because again, you know, we kind of buzz off that amount of energy for the next couple of days as well, which is great. So Keith's going to be working on them with them on creating a virtual tour. And they were looking at the high street specifically on that day. They'd gone out with some questions, some quiz questions for themselves. And they were also being encouraged to speak to members of the public to see whether they knew some of the answers to the questions and stuff. And it's always interesting when you take groups of young people out to speak to people on the high street as well, because first of all, there's a hesitancy to speak to anybody because they want to know what it is that you want to speak to them about. And some people are very like, well, there's nothing wrong with the high street. You know, there's nothing wrong with any of those areas. They're just fine. And other people are very kind of opinionated. And then in the middle, you'll have people that will tell you various tales of joy and woe as to, you know, them being out in that area on a night out or enjoying a particular event. You know, they talk about, you know, the Richard III, they talk about Sky Ride, they talk about the Mela, they talk about the Carnival. And so this is the most important thing for us, that kind of the community aspect of doing these newsrooms, in particularly that kind of community comms, if you like, making sure that communities are aware of what's going on and that they can participate and they can take part. It's not just about have they read it in the newspaper, have they heard it on the radio or seen it on the television or received a flyer through the door. It's the fact that through using social media in a kind of community creative way, we're able to engage people and get them not only to attend events, but also participate in what's going on and how things are happening, particularly the history of the city's buildings. They're aware of that stuff themselves. And I think I said a moment ago, there's Granby Street in particular and Churchgate, but Granby Street in particular, it's not owned by any particular community. It's owned by everybody. Everybody has equal access to it, and everyone will have their own experience, particularly those that have had a long history of Leicester. So Tina, for example, born and bred in Leicester. I've been in Leicester for 13, 14 years now. Granby Street is one of those main arteries that everybody's aware of. And so we really have to talk to people, the public, about what it is that they want to do. And so questionnaires and hopefully pop-up shops for people to come in and find out about what's going on is going to be one of those things that's going to be critical. So let's just play this film. It's just a couple of minutes from when we went down last Thursday to the Focus guys, and hopefully this will just give you a bit of an idea of what they do and how we went about it. So you can see from that, they were having a bit of fun. It's always good to go out with young people because I think they also get you to see spaces in a completely different way. When you look at space through their eyes, not with the eyes that you have as an adult, but certainly younger people in particular, not so much children, they see the world very differently, but particularly that age group that we were working with there, 14, 15, 16, 17, very different, and their workers as well. What was your observation of our walk around with them?
Well, firstly, I thought it was absolutely great because, as you just mentioned there, the way adults perceive space is totally different to the way young people see space. And the way young people, especially teenagers, use space and the relationship they have with space and areas of the city that they feel more or less comfortable in is really, really fascinating. So I would say they were very, very comfortable. They were very confident talking to members of the public and approaching people with their questionnaires and asking them their favourite kind of buildings, what they liked, what they didn't like. And it was really fascinating just seeing that dialogue take place. But just going back to the real reason they were there was obviously getting to know Keith and working towards this creation of some virtual tours, which they are going to be working on over the next several months with Keith. And I'm really looking forward to going back before our next newsroom and finding out kind of which areas and buildings their virtual tours are really going to be focusing on, which will give us a really good insight into just how much they've delved into the history and the culture behind those buildings. So that's what I'm looking forward to the most about going back and visiting the guys at Focus.
And they've also got an appreciation of how to use things like technology, you know what I mean? And how we can engage people in spaces, not just through walking through or participating in an activity that's in a shop, but also how to come up with some creative ways of getting people to get involved, for example, in the Heritage Action Zone project, if they don't live in Leicester, or they're interested in architecture, or they're interested in historic buildings and stuff.
Totally. And I think the fantastic thing about the involvement of Focus in Heritage Action Zone is those young people kind of Focus is their home. They spend probably 3-4 nights a week after school as part of projects.
College, yeah.
They're very aware of the dynamics of that space, and by the very nature of that, they will become Heritage Action Zone advocates, because the more they're involved in this project and the changes and that journey, along with all those adult decision makers and partners, the more they will advocate and become passionate about those spaces within their own communities. So when they're going home to all our kind of outer estate areas in the city, they will be telling their families and friends that they've been involved in projects like this. And I can feel the hairs on my arm standing up just talking about that, but it does have a real impact when you're involved in those kind of things.
Yeah, well, I think also because they're actually on Churchgate, it's great. We're not taking these young people from spaces or areas of the city and then bringing them into something and saying, well, actually, what do you think of this? You should care about this and stuff. Actually, they're, as you said, they're home a couple of nights a week, whether it's, alternative education, no education, school or college. They're spending all of this time. Well, they're using Churchgate to go into actually into the charity.
And the sense of belonging they have to their charity and Focus, we want to almost replicate that sense of belonging. So it becomes the whole Heritage Action Zone. We want those young people to have a sense of belonging, to the area, to that community. We say that it doesn't have a community in the sense of what we would, off the top of our head think of as a community, but actually there is a community of businesses, there's a community of people. There are lots and lots of families that actually live in Churchgate and Granby Street, and that's something I'm really passionate about. I think it was never something I was aware of, but over the last 10-15 years, lots and lots of residential spaces within city centres have been kind of populated by young people and families. And I think there's a real, opportunity for the Heritage Action Zone to really kind of, bring that to the fore and make that become, the underlying ethos of what Heritage Action Zone is about.
And it was interesting talking to someone the other day, wasn't it, about how when you live in some of these flats and stuff, maybe above shops and restaurants and charity shops or whatever their food outlets here in the city centre, actually something like Granby Street or Churchgate is your front garden. When you step out the door, that is your street. Your street, and it's really interesting. How do we create that? How do we create a community where everybody else's sense of community would be, based on neighbours, estate bases, streets, whatever it is. You could all come out and have a street party or something like that. Well, where's the connection between those people? How do they meet? Do you know who your neighbours are and stuff like that? So yeah, it's going to be an interesting.
I'm really looking forward to seeing what these guys create. I'm looking forward to actually doing one of their virtual tours. And actually, I think we'd be really great if we invited 2 of them to actually come and join us at the next newsroom to actually talk about it.
Why not? You do know it's a slippery slope. Want 2 young people from Focus, then we're going to have to bring in George the Parrot. I think that's so we'll have to tick all those boxes of running live events. What could possibly go right? Everything. That's the main thing. So that's Focus, and I think what's really interesting about that is there's 7 main aims to the scheme as well, and so it's like restoring shop fronts and other architectural features. And obviously from these young people's perspective, going into Focus a couple of times a week, they're aware of shop fronts. And this is something that Eleanor mentioned as well. The way shop fronts are not necessarily done in the correct way. Repairing and improving historic buildings. Now where Focus's home is quite an old building as well, and there's probably not much you could do with that due to building regs or being listed when it comes to access. bringing vacant spaces back into use. Again, that's a real thing, you know, that people turn around and say, well, you know, they'll probably be able to tell you how many empty shops there are on certain streets wherever they're from, even if they're visitors. And so it really is a sign of, I don't know, a vibrant economy maybe, or somewhere that you could visit. Improve the public realm, so you know what it's like, what it feels like when you're out the shops, I guess, in the street. Make the area and core facilities and businesses more accessible to all. And again, this is much not just including disability, but accessible to all, as in, you know, what's actually there. Is it of use, of value for everybody, and not exclusive. Facilitate training and education opportunities as well. So this is one of the bigger things that the project brings, very similar to the Townscape Heritage Initiative Greyfriars area, that had a bit of a training program as well. And I think you went on one of the training courses.
So as part of Heritage Action Zone, there will be a training program that will be opened up to businesses and people involved in the project. And there will be courses, well, training around, you know, things to spot in old and historic buildings. So if you're a tenant, your business is in a kind of historic building, it's a great way of understanding, you know, top tips of spotting damp, you know, cracks, and how to get them repaired and sorted out properly. But obviously that's something we can speak to Sophie about at the end, because she's the oracle on all of the kind of training programs and what opportunities there will be there. But I'm sure that as part of the newsrooms, we can do some promoting of that and what future training opportunities are going to be out there. Maybe we can feature that in the February one and have a bit of a focus on training, because I was lucky enough to go on, I think, 2 of the Townscape Heritage training programs, and they were absolutely amazing. As soon as I walked out, I've never looked at old buildings the same again. I'm always spotting, you know, things growing out of gutters and things that need to be repaired, and it just makes you
kind of switches you on to that.
Yeah, making people aware and more conscious about actually looking after and knowing how to look after their buildings is a big thing.
Now, those first 6 that I said, obviously all important in their own right and individually or as a group, but the final one is celebrate our high streets and give local communities a key role in deciding what work they want to see happening. And I think that's part of why we wanted to do, and we're so keen to do these newsrooms, so that whether people were watching live as they are now, or whether you stumble across it in 6 months' time or in 18 months' time, as the project's coming towards an end, it doesn't matter. It's the fact that there was an opportunity for people to get involved, and we wanted people's comments, and also starting to promote this active program of activities and entertainment and you know, all the things that we've come to know and expect in the city, like Skyride and open streets and various festivals, that Granby Street and Churchgate will become sort of a bit of a hub for those through the use of shops and events.
And as you mentioned at the start, I think we should plug it all the way through. You know, it's something I'm really, really passionate about. I hear lots of people say, oh, what's going on? I didn't know about this. You know, I wasn't asked my opinion. Well, actually, until the 31st of October, there is a live consultation. There's a questionnaire on the City Council website that anybody can go on, share their ideas, share their opinions for the area, and also share their memories of maybe, you know, working in the area, living in the area, visiting the area. And all of this can be found on the City Council's website, or people can Google consultation.leicester.gov.uk. And I've also put it into the feed on the Facebook page that we're streaming from today. Okay. So I think, and
I've just shared it as well, so you can see this here. This is the Heritage Action Zone survey. So it's open to the 31st of October, as Tina said. Gives you an idea here with some of the stats and the areas. There's a really good website as well with maps of the area that are involved on Granby Street and Churchgate, so you know exactly what it is. And certainly would encourage everybody just to click the online survey. I'm just going to click this one because I think something I mentioned earlier, which was really important. You know, who are you responding as? You know, are you representative of a community group or an organisation or other? And I think that list there means it's not. It is for you. It is for you to have your say and participate as well. And I think if we just click on some of these community groups as well here, you can see here it's pretty got a really good list of different organisations if you want to come at it from a community perspective. But also, you know, it's got other, and if it's other, make sure that if you're not on that list for whatever reason, get yourself on the other, because it just means that you'll be able to take part. And you know, it is anonymous. And you can even tell people what you're interested in. So, you know, right up to date, you're interested in today, or you're interested right back a couple of thousand years back to the Roman stuff. So I think, you know, from that perspective, it's a good survey. It seems pretty straightforward. It's something that we're going to do after. We didn't want to do it beforehand in case we prejudice ourselves, because we're already interested in this stuff. But we felt that if we did it, then we'd be over egging it. So go off, do it. And maybe the next newsroom, get in touch with us if you're from a community group and you'd like to have your say about the Granby Street and Churchgate. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to move on to the next section now. So you're going to go back around and do your social media thing.
Yes.
Okay, there we go. I can move over
out
now.
the way,
I can move over now. That's it. She's much better at social media than me, so she should be doing the social media bit. You know what I mean? She's probably better at me than doing this bit as well. So there we go. So look, we're going to move on to the next section now. And this was talking to James Burtmar. We did a Zoom call with James a couple of weeks ago. And James is the Workspace manager at LCB Depot. And what was really interesting, I'd never realised that when James was telling us, was the fact that there's 5 parts to what he does. So you've got the LCB Depot, which people will be aware of, and obviously the fantastic exhibition space they've got there at the front, maybe some of the events that they host as well on the last Friday of the month, etc. And also there's the 3 floors at the Phoenix Cinema, or the Phoenix Square Film and Digital Media Centre as it was when it opened. The office space is there, and we were lucky to have a space there for about 12 months many years ago when it first opened. And then there's also the Maker's Yard next to the curve, where you can do things that are a little bit more making stuff. So obviously Maker's Yard, it's people that, you know, Alex is there with his fantastic framing business that we've used before. So, you know, it's a really vibrant space for those that are maybe making things more, making noise, maybe that's the way to distinguish it. Do you make noise in your business? Yes, Maker's Yard is for you. Do you like quiet, peace and quiet? And are you working in an office? Yes, well, there's office spaces as well. It's probably a good, that's a good way of defining it. I'll have to share that with James. If you make noise, go to the Maker's Yard. And we've got 2 sections really to this interview with James. The first section, we're going to be talking about creative industries, Leicester's vision, if you like, partnerships, spaces, and the showcasing of things. And then in the second section, we'll have a chat about the first section. I'll get Tina back in to have a chat about that when we've played it. And then in the second section, we'll be talking about the Cultural Consortium. So building on our interview with the chair of the Cultural Consortium last time, Professor Christine White. Then we'll be talking about the Heritage Action Zone. So some of James's thoughts of the Heritage Action Zone and being involved in that as well. And a really exciting project coming up into, I think it's his 3rd or 4th year, he said it was, wasn't it? Which is design season in October. And some of that will be actually here on the Granby Street as well. So an opportunity to do that. So let's dive into our interview. I'll share my screen again, and then I'll play it for you. Welcome to the High Street Heritage Action Zone newsroom, and we're joined today by James Burtmar, who's the Workspace manager of Leicester's Creative Hub. So thanks for joining us, James.
Pleasure.
Good. So tell us a little bit, what does, first of all, the Leicester's Creative Hub involve? Because you said just before we came on to do the recording that it's several locations, and I always thought the depot was the only space.
Sure. Okay. Well, taking a step back from that, so LCB, if you like, it's a hybrid setup. It's a little bit like a council-owned business, if you like, and we think of it in that way. We think of it as a brand, LCB. LCB delivers workspace for creative industries, 40,000 plus square foot across 4 buildings. 2 at the depot, LCD depot. 1, we have 3 floors at Phoenix Square, and we have a dedicated sort of artisans facility at Maker's Yard, all in the cultural quarter, all within sort of spitting distance of one another. And our business, if you like, is selling workspace, renting workspace, and we think we do that very well. We're very popular. In fact, we're pretty much full. Even post-pandemic, when we lost a bunch of guys, you know, it was a tricky time for everybody. We lost businesses, we got new ones in, and actually our waiting list is as healthy, in fact, probably healthier than it's ever been. And we've seen post-pandemic a new crop of businesses, younger businesses, more men, more women, more ethnic and cultural diversity. So I think overall, on the city's behalf, the creative industries are in good health. And when I say the creative industries, we attempt to cater for all of those industries. When we say the creative industries, we mean it's a spectrum. So we mean design agencies, marketing people, architects, publishers, artists, performing arts organisations, arts charities, fashion, film, the whole lot. And that gives us a very mixed community. And it's because of this community that around about 4 or 5 years ago, we decided that we could continue to rent workspace and make money for the council, so to speak, deliver a great service. But what we could also do is reposition slightly and put out a bit more, invest in exhibitions, events, business support, build relationships with stakeholders, universities, etc., and just really try and build more fizz, more energy, create a greater sense of aspiration, draw people in with ideas. We don't commission loads of work, which we present here. We work with business partners, creative business partners, to present those. So we're very much a sum of the parts. I will say it's a sort of hybrid, borrows from various EU models. It's slightly different across the country. This sort of facility tends to be owned and run to the agenda of universities, things like that. We're operating as an independent brand. We get we're on a very, very long string from the council. As long as we don't do anything naughty, you know, we're allowed to continue and just really sort of celebrate the city's creative industries and thereby contribute to a fresh narrative of the city, not just about Richard III or Leicester City. You know, we think the creative industries has a really great story to tell, and the city should be benefiting more from that. So that's the idea of being a hub, creating more energy and working with partners through the cultural quarter. The various cafes and bars, there's been a real growth there. We have something called the CQ ground floor group, an informal group, and just really trying to create more energy, draw more people in. We have a number of ways to do that.
Yeah, brilliant. That's a nice summary there.
But yeah, Maker's Yard, there's a long, proud history there. We do have visit days, but it's essentially a workspace for quite a lot of fashion people working in textiles. We have an amazing sort of artisan picture framer using really old kit. There's a bunch of stuff there, yeah, but it's very much more the hands-on stuff, the craft, maker.
Right. Now you've got this innovative, I keep using the term innovative, but I can't think of anything else because that's exactly what it is with how you've developed the last Friday of the month as well. And that's been a real, obviously pre-pandemic as well, being a very successful thing with people come in and all sorts of stuff. And is that kind of what you're trying to do with the exhibition space at the front that you've got there of the depot? Is you really just trying to use it in a way that your marketplace, if you like, wants to use it? So you're reflecting what your users are doing.
Yeah, yes. I mean, you're broadly right. I mean, I would say that there's a specific purpose to what we put on in our Lightbox exhibition space, which I'll come to. But overall, whether it's we do events aimed at different people. So until recently, I mean, all this obviously has been on pause. Some of it went online successfully, and our numbers in terms of audience have really been healthy there, and we're required to innovate. But for pre-pandemic, and these are slowly coming back, for instance, we had a regular talk and sort of networking event with the Research Institute at University of Leicester, which focus on the creative industries. We'll pick that up in some shape or form as we go forward. We're very keen to get businesses and creative people to do things for themselves. Now that sounds patronising, because obviously they run their own business, they're good at doing things themselves. But I think part of that energy question in the city is what I felt, because I lived in the city and moved away for sort of 13, 14 years. When I came back, you've still got a great creative community, but it's the sum of the parts you don't always feel. So one of the things we put a lot of energy into is targeting a group subsector, so design agencies or fashion or makers or visual arts or film. And we work with a cluster of businesses there to help them organise themselves and grow as a network, thereby moving on to then present events, lead activity that's useful to their sector. We move from a role of being facilitator to basically being a partner. A very successful example of that is Create Leicester, which is, we have the biggest design agency cluster outside of London in the city. Again, something that's not known, it should be known. So those agencies now link, they work together, they raise the money together, and they do regular events. And they've just done their first event at the EMU. They've been hosted here, and the idea up until now, the idea is by doing that at the EMU, they're talking to new talent. So you might argue that there's a student retention angle there. Well, maybe there is, but really it's just about existing businesses talking to new talent. So that's really great. And our partnership with BNU is rolling. Events go purely cultural and social. You talked about last Friday. That was driven by a desire to just have a social, a friendly thing, get people together. And yeah, you're right. So we eat street food, nice cocktails, and lots of creative content through our partnerships, associations with individuals in all of our meeting spaces. So the whole building, the whole ground floor became like a mini festival once a month. And those numbers audience got really good, massively diverse, reflecting the city. We're really pleased with that. And it really is a sensible reason. It becomes our sort of, it becomes our promotion. It becomes our, this is what we're about. And it's just, it builds a conversation with people, so they start to come here for other reasons. We stop those events at 10 o'clock so that people would then go across into the bars in the cultural quarter, so we're working together in that way. We have Easy Saturday, which is on smaller numbers, but on a similar tip, it's aimed at families and young people, lots of creative play. And obviously through all of this, we have a fantastic partner in Gray's Kitchen, independent business, amazing guys, great artisan menu. So, you know, we combine these things in the same way that we'll combine the efforts of an external promoter to come in. It's worth mentioning that our exhibition programme is similar but different. That's led by our programme officer, Chris Slow, phenomenally well-networked guy locally. And what the purpose of that is broadly each month there's a different exhibition theme. Those exhibition themes represent the different subsectors in the creative industries, design, fashion, film, etc. And the year rolls on. What Chris does is works with business networks, business contacts, and by the way, our business contacts are way beyond this building. We have 120 odd businesses here. We'll have relationships with probably now up to 300 businesses. Clearly, they're not all in the depot or the Phoenix or the shop all over the city. So we combine those relationships. We draw them in. We link to new talent, specific courses at DMU, and for that 3-4 week period, we have an exhibition, for instance, around photography, and photographic businesses take part in that. Workshops talked, all linked to the exhibition. The idea is we're turning businesses onto new talent, and we're turning new talent onto what the demands of entrepreneurialism and thinking in a startup. So you get to see, if you come to the exhibition, lots of really great stuff. But it is very much the purpose of it is to help that subsector sort of grow and create a sense of ambition.
To a learner driver. So
yeah,
how do you reach back and do that? I mean, I teach on the creative media entrepreneurship module at DMU. So you know, our students are in the past and communication arts have taken part in creative coffee and and I've done lots of things where it's about visiting and participating and getting involved in film festivals and stuff. So I really like that. And I think what you guys do really well is the fact that it's like a living brochure. That's what I like. There's a physical brochure, you can find stuff, but there's always an opportunity that when you go, yes, there's that exhibition, but it just feels connected, as in you could ask someone a question about something else and there's always someone there that can ask. And I think that is, yes, student retention is a big thing, but I think being connected
And I've always had the approach that, you know, there's not a campus and an off campus. Actually, you know, the universities should see themselves that Leicester is their campus. And I think you fit that really well. We've got the barrier between us, where I'm sitting here now, just off Granby Street. We've got Charles Street, which might as well be the size of the Channel when it comes to some people's perception of how far it is to get to the cultural quarter. And obviously Chris has visited us as well, which is great. So that's the first segment that we've got from James. Really interesting conversation there with him as well. Obviously, there's a lot of energy and a lot of vision that he's brought to that role as the workspace manager and the connectivity. But I think definitely his view of going away for a period of time and seeing different things. He mentioned about living in a European city for quite a long time and working. Seeing how different things work, different connections, and coming back with a not a usual suspects kind of approach to it, which is, you know, the people to use are the usual suspects. Is how do we build new partnerships? How do we constantly innovate and look to move things forward? So it was a really interesting conversation with James, and the reason we've split the films there really is because when you look at what they're hoping to achieve from the Heritage Action Zone, it was a nice fit with some of the things that James was mentioning, and everybody as well, including the people that we spoke to during the first newsroom, which there's four main outcomes to the scheme. And the first is to increase awareness and learning about the history of Granby Street and the Churchgate conservation areas, which, as I said before, you know, no one owns those spaces. They're kind of quite transient. People move through them, sort of gateways from the train station into the city, and then beyond the clock tower down towards maybe the bus station, particularly not so much local buses, but certainly people using the coaches, and then beyond down towards Abbey Park. So it's got that first opportunity really maybe for to educate people about what the history of the area has been. You know, now obviously a lot of people will walk past the statue outside the train station, and those that give it a cursory glance will be aware that it is actually Thomas Cook, and everything that came from Thomas Cook with the first package holiday running from, was it Leicester to Loughborough was the first package tour? Yeah, and then obviously we've got the Thomas Cook Hotel, and then the various iconic buildings down Granby Street, like the Ishcon Centre, the Turkey Cafe, and as you move down towards the clock tower, maybe for the first time, this is people being aware of what these buildings were, because it might not necessarily be obvious now due to modernisation and new shops and shop frontages and stuff, but also it's about encouraging people to stop and look at those interpretation boards that are available now for people to look at, and then maybe how do we bring those alive and animate those a little bit as well. So again, all this kind of work in progress. And the second point was to improve the physical appearance of these streets through reinstatement of particular things that people would like to see, repair and restoration of shop fronts, and key historical buildings, almost a reason to go on a journey down a particular route, if you like, through the city to find out what was there, what it was about. And also I think the connection to the world that we live in today, no matter how old it was. And this is how we get young people particularly interested in heritage and history and things like that, our connection of place in the world, where people are from, how old Leicester is, if you like, right back to the Roman times, is to be able to not just have interpretation boards that people of a particular age would be interested in looking at, but also how do you bring that alive and make it dynamic, and get them to have some kind of ownership and interest in that space. The third point is to engage local communities to develop arts and cultural activities. So rather than just travel through spaces, how do we make them places that attract people because of the opportunity to take part in art and cultural activities, whether that's, you know, film screenings, film projections, whether that's animation, whether that's, you know, sketching, right through to, you know, performances, things that people can participate in. I don't think it really matters what it is, as long as something that's going on and it feels as if it is accessible, particularly when it comes to cost. So either zero cost, preferably, or low cost for people to be able to engage in it, so that you could, encourage people with families to come and participate as well. I think that's going to be one of the key things that we've got that we can do with the Heritage Action Zone. And then finally, create a healthier, more positive and long-term sustainable environment by supporting efforts to improve things like air quality, increase use of sustainable transport, encourage greater well-being and address low-level crime. So, you can't have somewhere that has all of these things if you don't address things like access when it comes to things like vehicles, the use for bikes, and then that kind of, maybe some quiet spaces maybe, and then low level crime. Okay, so you've got to, if you're going to have these kind of things there, you've got to police them and make sure that they're accessible and helpful and people feel as if it's a safe environment. So it's a big ask, but at the same time, the only way you make these big changes is by taking these small steps. And so by making it a project to 2024, hopefully we'll encourage people to do something, and then we'll build on that, and then communities will take ownership. I think also one thing that comes from that is something important that Tina mentioned earlier, which is about the amount of people now that live above a lot of the high street shops that we see on a lot of the streets that the shops that we see on Granby Street and Churchgate. The families that live above those, that this is their front yard, this is their front garden, this is their street. How do we make it not so much less commercial, but it feels that it's a commercial space that welcomes people to be able to reside in it as well. So that's a really, really important one. So they're the four main outcomes of the scheme. And again, all of these things are on the website, and the maps are there for the Granby Street and Churchgate conservation areas. So I would encourage you to look through the links that Tina's put up as well, because that will take you through to the website where you can look at the various areas that are involved and see whether maybe you live in that area. It's an area that you cycle through, you walk through, you go through to get to the bus, to your job, on your way home from college. It doesn't matter. Everybody is able to participate, and please take the time to do that survey, and I'll keep mentioning that again before we get to the end. So let's look at the next section there, and we need to get to the next part of our screening. So this, we're going to carry on with talking to James, and what I want from James is to be able to take us to the next section of the conversation that we're going to have, that part two. So let me share the screen with you again. Here we go, and we'll move on to the next section.
Opening statement, but what do you think you would like to see it do? Why were you interested in participating?
Well, that's a good, I like the question. You touched on two things there. If I just take a step back, and you mentioned not particularly BMU, but a university or a council or a LEP, or a big brand. For me, it is incumbent upon institutions to relax their boundaries, to work in ways that are fluid, to work to the betterment of the area that they're in, to work to the betterment of the industries around, the people around. Institutions struggle to do that, and having been resolutely freelance for most of my life, but got recruited by institution, that is a theme that always emerges. How do you break down those barriers? So for me, the journey for somebody in business should be, okay, well, I'm studying such and such course at such and such university, but now I need to go across town because there's this opportunity is helpful. Then I need to go back across town. I need to be able to talk to this people. It's a sort of, I don't suggest I'm reaching for anarchy. Well, maybe, but
healthy anarchy.
It's not all bad really, but it's really very much about you put the individual first and the institutions. It's a difficult one for institutions because an institution basically seeks to perpetuate itself. That's a tricky one when you look at the growth in a country, culture in a country, definitions in a country as essentially created by individuals and small businesses and small collectives. So I think institutions need to know their place, if you like, in a nice way. The Heritage Action Zone, and ostensibly is there to say this area needs new investment, it needs new perceptions around it, it needs people to see it in a different light. So it's a heritage zone, but it's about action and forward motion. And that's an agenda I subscribe to because, you know, having come back to the city, I have a long association with Granby Street, and I'm aware of Churchgate and all the rest of it, know it quite well. And clearly there is scope for development. Now, councils are pretty good at fixing the roads, but what councils aren't so good at is, you know, do the hardware, but how do you do the software? How do you code that area? How do you bring new ideas to that area? And that's about getting out of the way and drawing people in, because as going back to what I previously said, it's people that will really animate the space. And institutions sometimes forget that. So Heritage Action Zone is an opportunity for me to sort of play with a group of professionals drawn from different sectors to say, how do we relax our boundaries and define something? So what should Granby Street look like? What could it look like? I know, let's have a cultural programme, have all sorts of events on there over a 3-year period that animates the space, draws people in, gets that conversation going, gets those ideas flowing. And then it follows through with a capital programme where property can be renovated, repurposed. Sometimes it's just fixing up the front, but there's some really exciting ideas in the mix on Granby Street and Churchgate to completely repurpose buildings to be an exhibition space or new workspace and so on. So to me, there's an agenda there that makes sense for LCB's overall mission. So I've got to be involved, and I'm pleased that I am.
Yeah, I like your description there of several of those points, and particularly as the fact that, you know, you've got this heritage action zone, so therefore it's a defined space, and you've got to sell that space to people if they don't see it naturally as a ring-fenced area, if you like. So you bring a lot of experience, I think, from both your freelancing experience, but also the role that you play now, particularly with the cultural quarter, which has had its own journey of, you know, being a good thing and then maybe not being seen such as a good thing. You know, the whole City of Culture bid, all of those things sometimes aren't necessarily successful in the way that we'd like them to be successful. And I think that's really what you can bring to the Heritage Action Zone, from what I've heard you say, is the fact that
I think on that
zone, how are we going to get all these parties to play together and be boundaryless, but kind of, you know, play to their strengths, if you like, rather than own it?
Absolutely. And you mentioned culture. I mean, I came in when it was well established, but, you know, I did walk around, and it is that analogy of, right, we built the hardware, what about the software? And I think, you know, maybe there's an argument that things should be the other way around. So you have places in cities where art is moving because it's affordable. So the activity comes first and suggests new definitions for that area. Now you then run into problems like gentrification and those original creators moving out and so on. There's various philosophies on that. Wayne Hemingway, the designer, says actually that's difficult, it's damaging, it's happened to me in my business, but actually it releases ideas in the business. You have to move on and find new space, new ideas come through. So it's a kind of bloodletting, but it's healthy. Not everybody would agree, but I kind of tend towards that end. But it can be done, you know, that gentrification can be a bad thing, no question. But I also think, going on that, what the Heritage Action Zone could achieve, if it doesn't become, this is the problem, we organise ourselves. I'm fascinated with how we organise ourselves. It's dominated my sort of career, really. But then we become an institution, and then we resist those new ideas. So you need to guard against that. There's institutions of the mind. You know what I mean? It's like you don't actually build a building and say, right, it's all done. You just say, right, this is what we're doing, and you become rigid, and you're not open to new ideas. And really, the one thing we know about life, and we know therefore about cities, is that actually we need to be comfortable with perpetual change. We all want change because we want things to improve, but we all resist it because we're basically hunter-gatherers somewhere back there. You know what I mean? And there's an ongoing tension, which could be a creative tension. So it's really important that the Heritage Action Zone leads the way with new ideas, draws lots of people in, but isn't precious about its planning, and can be fleet of foot and can be fluid and change if things become available. I was one guy. We have in October sort of big thing for us each year is design season. I'm just talking to Pradi at the Ice Concept. He's taken over the bank, and it's going to be an amazing place. It already does great stuff, but the capital investment he's got coming out, that's going to give a big, wide, tall exhibition space to the city. That creates new ideas, that creates new opportunity, new potential. So how then do we link Pradi and what he's trying to achieve for the Icon Centre, which is there for the sort of high Christian religion? Is like, how do we embrace that? How do we help them colour that picture?
Yeah, it's so true, because I think what you've said there as well really resonates with Tina and I's own experience of the sort of the last 12, 14 years in Leicester of various events, but also the fact that it's not just about a venue being known as that one thing. It's about being able to turn around and say, well, there's 3 or 4 other venues of different sizes than that. Then how do we collaborate? How do we send people on a journey around the city? How do we make Leicester that kind of weekend destination for people that are interested in photography or film or design? Yeah. And I think the other thing as well is about, I remember many years ago talking to someone at the Leicestershire promotion saying they always got very close to landing some big conferences, but, you know, at the Curve or, you know, maybe at the Montfort Hall or somewhere like that, using the universities. But then the hotels, we never had the bed capacity. And of course, we've got a real promotion now on building more hotels, which is great. And so suddenly we're at that point. Well, then it's then not just about the business conference, it's the people that come, that are around it, that come to visit those exhibitions. So these is informal, if you like, the kind of unmeasurable intangibles of being in Leicester is the fact that it's got a healthy high street gallery of different things. It's got a healthy place that you can go and visit and watch something that may be independent or improv or that. And obviously building on the vast heritage of the Comedy Festival, obviously, which has done amazing things for the city. I think this gives us a real opportunity, maybe a time frame as well with the Heritage Action Zone, almost similar to the City of Culture, where there's a time frame, a very long, narrow road that everybody will have had their own experience of, good and bad, at various times of the morning and the evening, and have their own view on it. It's an interesting way of galvanising people together. And I think you've got a key role to play in that with what you do there in the Cultural Quarter.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we try, I suppose, you know, years ago, the LEP, Leicester and Leicester Economic Partnership, commissioned somebody to write, a really good agency, a good consultancy to write a plan for creative industries. And when they had that plan, as far as I can tell, it then went on the shelf. What we did was said, that plan is out. We are the centre of the creative industries. We aren't the creative industries, all the businesses are. So we adopted it. And one of the things there was say, draw more people into the cultural quarter. So there's a sort of reasoning as to why we focus what we do, build more relationships with universities. That's why we do that. And there was a suggestion that the city and the county, I should say, could really shout in an authentic way about design. So hence the design season was called. And so it's not just random ideas we make up, we try and look for random reason. And I would say about the Heritage Action Zone, I'm a believer, pick this up from working abroad, is that in this idea of the triple helix, so that the business, private sector, public sector and the academic sector should all work together to a common plan. Now again, to grow, for instance, the creative industries, or to grow construction, or to grow the legal profession, you get those things working together, you'll get the talent retained. The courses will be the right courses subject to local need, and so on and so forth. So that's hard to achieve because of what I meant about institutions. They have their own path and they maybe see, oh, that's just local civic work. No, I would argue this is essential work. You should look at it the other way around. But it is hard to achieve. But the Heritage Action Zone puts business, puts policy, councils, municipalities, if you like, and puts academic institutions round the same table to work together. So on a microcosm, I like to think that if we, across 3 years, we do achieve growth, we can be a shining example to our local institutions. Say, look, guys, work like this. Don't be so precious. Relax your rules. Don't just think about statutory obligations. Think about dream. Think of, you know, and often you'll get a bold pronouncement of what the city's going to do. But my question is, Space Park, Cultural Quarter, whatever, have you got policy on board? Have you got academia on board? Have you got business on board? If you don't, it's an idea, not a concept. And we need concepts because concepts work in the real work. Ideas work here. And the thing about ideas is we all have.
Yeah. And you were saying there's all about time as well. 3 years is a good period of time to start bringing about a little bit of habit changing, getting people to collaborate. Right. If they meet monthly for 3 years, you suddenly don't, well, actually, why aren't I hanging out with you? Why aren't we doing this over here? Why can't we do that street? I like that. That's a really, I think, a refreshing way of talking. So you mentioned the design season a couple of times, which is great, which is obviously one of the reasons I wanted to drill down into that. So how does that play out? Is it kind of multi-venue? Is it a crossover period of time?
Well, it's sort of fluid in a sense. It's changing and growing, but its overall direction. We pick up. Let me read through this wonderful book here. So there was, as I said, the LEP commissioned a sector plan, and it said they did its interviews with businesses across the city and county. It said design makers, architecture, design agencies, fashion, small fashion cluster doing really interesting, modern, ethically based things. This is an area that you should shout about. It could attract more investment of one kind or another. But prior to that, we had this wonderful thing, which is the first thing I read when I sat down on my first day and sort of shut the door, made a cup of coffee and read. That talks about the history of design. We're innovators here. The reason your credit card takes such a bashing and we're so, shopping as a leisure activity, you could argue is to all the point of sale work, the innovation that took place, the idea that shopping should be an experience. Now, mixed feelings about that as a person, but unquestionably it's driven growth, driven business growth. Point of sale thing was pretty much created in Leicester, combining marketing people and sign writers and shop fitters and all that. You're going back 50, 60 years now, but some great bands grew out of that and led the way. So we are quite humble people. We're polite, we're friendly, by and large, everybody gets along. What we're trying to do is put a bit of ambition in and not be afraid of that ambition. Reach far, let's shine it up, let's hold it up high. Design is a way we can do that. So design season was born, and this year, October 18th to 30th, we're coming to the 4th design season. Now, it's a slow burn. It isn't about going out and raising loads of sponsorship and commissioning money like a cultural organisation, which we're most definitely not, as in capital C, arts and culture. What we're doing is we're inviting businesses and saying, listen, we've got design here as a strength. So let's start talking about it. Let's start putting something together to celebrate that. So there's a kind of 5 to 10 year plan to hopefully build something that's sustainable, world-class, and attracts people from all over the world. And we're getting there. Last year was design season 3. Through the partnership we have, there's about 40 programming partners, all designers and design businesses across the city. They program talks, workshops, events, exhibitions, etc. And we act as the convener of that. We produce that and we lead on the marketing and branding. We do our best because we're not a specialist. Last year, because of the pandemic, a design agency approached us and at an extremely modest mates rates basically built us a great website. Year 3, that website won an international award. So design season 4 now, we're in more venues. The Heritage Action Zone is contributing. We're most grateful for that to support a workshop, public-facing cultural programme. This helps us. There are 2 main audiences for design season. One is the business audience. So the business-led events will attract business interest from around the country. And now they're online. Those could be abroad. Last year we did have international online audience. And the other audience is the general public. And that suits, we feel that fits Leicester. We need to be there to excite Leicester people about design, get them enthusiastic about their own city, visiting places, taking part in activities and so on. And that reveals the third hidden audience, which is those stakeholders, those brands that I mentioned at the beginning. We're not going after them. We're creating something compelling and they're going to come and find us. That's the dynamic. And what we've got coming up underneath that is 3 years in, we have a loose collective cross-discipline design group, Design Leicester. They're going to start to come out of the shadows and ultimately they will lead it. We, LCB, will be a part.
I love it, the way that you have that hidden third agenda there by drawing those people in because the other 2 are invested. And of course, the other way around is normally it's the money, the designers, and then they're trying to get the public interested. or a small.
That's exactly right, and that's why I made the point. Without wishing to take a cheap shot, I do think that the cultural sector, for instance, needs to look at itself. The idea that it gets funding, it raises other money, and then stops and thinks, what about an audience? And so there's always a gap between income from audience and audience numbers and the money it takes to operate, hence the need for funding. For me, I think funding should be put into something which will, you need an exit strategy within 5 to 10 years. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's not sustainable. And I would argue that to really have your finger on the pulse and go for what's exciting, you need to do things that are much more immediate. I'm part of a loose online network that talks about the best, everything you need is on your street. But you've got to have the imagination to see it, give it the right setting, the right production, if you like, and then build it that way. And you're building it in hand with an audience because they are, these people are plucked from the audience. And it needs more time. But as I suppose I'm saying, I don't want to reinvent to see us as a cultural organisation, although we are with a small c. We are about sort of culture in terms of behaviour. And the idea that you can get loads of money and whiz off around the world and see great stuff and bring it back, and then audiences will turn up, build it, and they'll come. For me, it's a fallacy. There's always going to be a need for public sector investment. And if I was an investor, I was taught I'd like a yield, and that's got to come back. And then I can take that money, invest in something else. And the way we are currently, it creates a block. So you don't always get that growth of new ideas being supported. It's not innovation in my book. It's not meant as a cheap shot. It's meant as a sort of respectful comment. And we work with a number of small independent cultural organisations who very much try to encourage them to look at multiple income streams, not over-reliance on one source. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, and you're probably a really good person to ask this question to. So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. We're a small independent museum here, and we've done a lot of work with sort of museum development East Midlands and sort of the challenges that those organisations have had around COVID. So obviously because it's something that's affected everybody, in lots of different ways, good and bad. But it's affected their, volunteers have dropped off, but suddenly they've realised that someone who's gone off to university or someone who's interested in their subject matter halfway around the world could run their social media very well. They don't have to be standing at the entrance talking to visitors. So we've got that has really kind of challenged that sector into doing it. And I guess because of lack of audience and being closed, COVID has really, and I've seen this with the people that we work with around the world, that it's driven innovation because you've got no other recourse. And also because I work in a lot of low resource settings, money's never a conversation that you have because it's like, we want to do this, what do we have? And whereas, you find here that sometimes things are kind of paralysed with, well, we need 10 grand before we can sit down and have a brainstorming session. And so I think it's really interesting what you're saying about using all of those experiences and using something like the Heritage Action Zone and with Granby Street and Churchgate, well-known spaces that every member of the public who lives in Leicester will know about. You know what I mean? We're not talking about the old Greyfriars area, for example, with the previous Townscape Heritage Initiative, which we're involved in. This is somewhere that people will know, down the side of the High Cross or the old Shires, the one up to the train station. No matter which way you describe it to people, they know where they are. There's a really interesting opportunity. Do you think COVID has created those kind of questions that you can ask now without feeling like you're kind of rocking the boat or taking a cheap shot because you turn around and say, well, we've got to innovate because we need to move forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has. And let's pause for a moment because COVID for many has been dreadful episode. And lots of people have struggled and suffered on a personal level, on a business level, and so on. And it's, I wouldn't want ever to sort of overlook that. However, and I've got an interview later today, today, where I'm talking to a business we hope to do a sort of film case study during design season. We have a series of films on LCD TV. That's a YouTube channel, by the way. And that's going to focus on, they bucked the trend. COVID came along, knocked everybody for six, but they've grown. they've recruited people that will never live in this country, but they can work with them. They can widen, you know, their sort of skill pool, if you like. And actually, I'm really interested to sit down and talk you through that. They've found a way to respond well, and not in a way where, you know, Mr. Bezos decided, well, everybody at home and they like shopping, so I'm going to get to the moon off the back of that. I don't quite mean something as what I would say is crass as that, but you know, in a quite sophisticated way, this creative company has done great work. They've responded to that. But yeah, unquestionably, the thing online has become hugely important. But I am somebody that likes walking around an art gallery, likes going to football, likes going to a bar, likes going to a cafe, that real world thing. I'm not suggesting we don't need it. Look at our city centres. Clearly, we've got all this space. We need to innovate. We need to find new ways of creating city centres or working with city centres so they become, there are reasons to go there. They're not just quiet places where everybody lives, where you're not allowed to make too much noise, which is sometimes how it feels, you know, with all the growth in residential, but we need places to live. So, you know, city centres, how do we innovate there? But just, I don't want to drift here, I'm coming back to your point. When you look at something like a museum, clearly we need, I value the time immensely with my children as well, walking into a museum and seeing something amazing, just standing there, you know, and talking to creators. We need that experience, but what do we need? Yes, okay, online, people don't feel right, they don't feel safe, so we need to be online, it's safe, but also what doors does it open? How do we have an international audience for an exhibition and so on? So what we need is we need people that can bring humanity to online. So it doesn't feel a little bit like we're doing our best now, you know what I mean? But it's not good enough. Both of us would say this is a bit weird and funky and all the rest of it, but we're doing our best. But how do we work with those people that can create a really human experience online so it doesn't feel second best? It's a valid experience right alongside going to a gallery or whatever. So that's the problem we have to solve, rather than just dumping everything we have online and saying, right, look at that place. Isn't it great? It's not the right thing. So the agenda becomes driven by a period of lockdown. Let's hope we don't reach back to a time when things normal wasn't working anyway, as they say. It was, you know, it left us cold, some things were good, some things weren't. Let's look at those people rather than expect we or people who have a role in an institution, in a cultural venue, in a sporting venue, in a bar or cafe. They don't know all the answers. How do we create a feeling within society that we need new skills within all those businesses? We need new approaches. And that can be painful for the people that run them, because you're there to kind of feel you know what you're doing. And actually, sometimes, the pandemic, you don't know what you're doing. So it moves more to a leadership model rather than a management model. Leadership is about the release of ideas, management is about the control and delivery of ideas. And so it's very much around how do we innovate, how do we create a feeling of constant innovation, driven by a pandemic and whatever the next thing.
Yeah, I do like that concept of humanity as well. It's like you and I having this conversation in 2D. If we were sitting on a stage somewhere with an audience, we'd be 3D. And if it was 4D, we'd actually be saying to the audience, what do you want us to talk about?
Yeah,
We're not just have a conversation and tell you stuff. What is it you want to ask us? And I think that's what we need to get to, isn't it? In the real world as well as virtual.
And the great thing about, say, for instance, social media. So we had a thing with our exhibitions, beginning of lockdown. Chris worked so hard. Oh my God, what am I going to do? We've got our exhibition those different months just to a night point. Okay, we'll have to put them online. And we had an epiphany one evening when I was texting him saying, it's just, he posted a series of videos. So each exhibitor spoke, and then there's some of their work, a little bit of text and details and so on. And I rang him and said, is that the promotion or is that the exhibition? He said, oh, it's the promotion. I said, it's not, it's the exhibition. And we had this moment. Actually, there is a small way you can take a step into, as I say, a more humane, it's not quite the right word, but a humanity-based approach on social media content is that actually our numbers went really well. People stayed engaged. And you know, we're looking now, that's our little learning thing. We're looking to grow that. So it does away the need, you know, an institutional need for a comfort zone, such as a brochure that you stick 20, 30 grand into. And let's be honest, where do they end up? Now, some people like to walk around with those. I'm not suggesting they don't, But there is, and we just scratch out and save money and put that money into other things. So it's like go with what works. And also about online, what can be useful is people discuss things. Read the comments, for crying out loud. Don't just look at the likes. Read the comments. That's the conversation in front of an exhibit at a museum. It's the equivalent thereof. So you can learn from that. And all of this then winds back to your role, your job, whatever your bloody job description says. And you need to start to say, I need to pay attention to that. Some of it's banter and just rubbish, but actually that's a really good point. What does that point mean? It's feedback, it's insight, and so on.
Excellent. Well, listen, James, thank you for taking the time to speak to us. I feel as if I've learned something as well, which is always nice to actually interview someone and actually feel as if you've got something. And then I want to meet you in 4D as well. So that's
oh yeah, well in 4D. Oh well, that'll be fun.
Get Grays in for a coffee, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the thing you're looking forward to the most with the design season? Is this? Do you have a favourite in that? Is it something you think actually that's really different, or that's the best bit, but no one else would think it because it's really simple?
They're all my babies. I'm not going to prefer one. It's like what I really like. I suppose October 18th to the 13th, design season.co.uk. Come and find it. Search design season. There's lots of really great stuff. It's a work in progress, but it's great as it is. Look at LCD TV. Look at some of the events and so on. Come to some of the workshops supported by the Heritage Action Zone. This all should be confirmed in 2 weeks. I'm in that horrible stress zone now where we're getting everybody to say, yes, I'm doing it. So because we don't have a big budget, we have to be very opportunistic. We have to hustle basically to get things in, but that gives it an energy. What I would say, it's not quite sort of answer your question. I'm looking forward to the emergence of Design Leicester. They're going to feature in the programme, and then they will be coming out of the traps, I believe, beyond design season to really go after that sponsorship I was talking about, help grow, help infuse people, because the designer voice will have much more credibility now, so we recognise that. So Design Leicester, watch design season, log on, come and visit something. It's all there on the website. Follow us on Insta at Design Season, but watch out for Design Leicester.
That's lovely. Well, thank you for coming back to Leicester and getting us all dreaming. Like I said, it's been great to talk to you.
Everybody's dreaming already. I just had to listen. It's just like
maybe catalysing the conversation. Yeah, catalysing.
We try and give permission. That's what I'm saying. Look, basic rule is if somebody comes in, we try and say yes, we can do that, even if it's not in your job description. Job descriptions need to be tucked in the drawer.
Well, I think they're one of the things that need to be a little bit loose, like restrictions with organisations as well. So yeah, it's good to see that you're motivated, that you want to do all of that. So thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us.
Cool, nice to talk. Thank you.
So that was great talking to James. I think one of the great things about being able to organise these newsrooms as well, it's not just about meeting James in 4D, if you like, using that analogy at an event, but sometimes getting someone in a one-to-one scenario and asking them specific questions, and the importance of things. So sometimes, something like a design season, which is beyond the cultural quarter, is then able to do some stuff that's part of the Heritage Action Zone, the cultural consortium, and the thing that they can do, the Design Leicester he was talking about there, and how all of these things fit together. If we're able to support the Ishcon Centre with their development there, do some stuff with the empty shops, maybe doing something that's like a community art space, the photography project with Louise from Derby, then I think that's really where the innovation is going to come about. That there's this long-term project, or 3 years. That's a good period of time to be able to get people interested and involved. Now, some of the things that I spoke about earlier was how do we get people interested in it, come along, get involved in the projects as a community group and stuff. So fill out the survey again. So me talking about the survey again, but I mean, from business perspective, because I think this, we're part of that journey with, I think James mentioned there, the triple helix of business, private sector, academic, etc., is the business owners and property owners and leaseholders in the area that have got properties on Granby Street and Churchgate can apply for grants up to 75%. So again, it's a fair old chunk of money, that's available, for them to reinstate lost architectural features such as windows. So maybe take out some of these modern windows and put it back to, you know, whether it's the Georgian period, we've done what it is. I know we had some retweets from the Leicester Georgians on Twitter, so I'm sure they'll be delighted to go back to some of that architectural, those architectural features. Improving shop fronts and repairing architectural features. I think that was one of the things I'll always remember from our time, and particularly Tina's engagement with the Greyfriars Townscape Heritage Initiative area, was the reinstatement of things like brass letterboxes and stuff in the area, in the old town, and the difference that made when it came to people's perceptions of an area being run down or being vibrant, whether the original furniture fitted with that area. And then finally, bringing empty floor space back into use. So not just shops, but actually, you know, maybe some of the 2 or 3, because you walk down both of those, Granby Street and Churchgate, just how tall some of these buildings are. You're talking sort of, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5 stories before you even look at a basement that is empty. And how can we bring some of that floor space back, whether that's for community use, business use, or kind of residential use as well. So, I mean, a lot of the eligible works will be using traditional materials and methods, and also it's about reinstating traditional details and shop front improvements. And I think that's really important. And you've got to understand that there's a whole team of people now at the City Council that are there to work with businesses and give people that advice. So if you go onto the website, there's an email you can send through, and they'll tell you about, is your project eligible, things like, you know, grant funding that's available, you know, the likelihood of you receiving the grant as well. I think that's also a really important thing, so that people aren't wasting their time. So, you know, some lots of information there that's really good. And also it tells you a little bit about the training that you can get, and then getting support to run your own community projects in that area. So it's a very intensive website with lots of information on it, lots of engagement, telephone numbers as well as email, which I think is really good these days. If you've not got access to email, there's a telephone number there for you to ring. And so, you know, make sure that you go off and check the website. Tina would have been putting some links into the Facebook page for things like the design season and all that kind of stuff, and the LCB TV that I'm sure James was mentioning, and you'll be able to find anyway from the LCB website. But again, this is all part of Heritage Open Days, the reason why we're doing the newsroom today. And the Heritage Open Day initiative is it's the largest festival of history and culture in the UK. And so various buildings are available. Tina's put a link through to the brochure. So there are buildings that are open, like the Y Theatre are open at the moment for traditional games and stuff, which has been going very well. Some really good podcasts have been created there, and lots of photos, engagement yesterday from Leicester Stories and Decentered Media and the Y Heritage Project themselves, doing stuff on social media, sharing that in Instagram. So have a look for that. But also you can find out information by using the hashtag Leicester Roots, which you may remember seeing on C Creatives and Mr. Shea's nice film that we started with, because people are just trying to encourage everyone to share their stories that they've got of those spaces, their use, their nights out, their days, the things they remember as a child, maybe where they worked. Because again, we've not really talked about that you can have a particular building, but how many spaces could that have given to businesses or people to live, or, you know, artisans over 100 years? What's the turnover of businesses in those spaces? You know, not just Thomas Cook or the Turkey Cafe, that Art Nouveau style Turkey Cafe that by local architect and former mayor as well, Arthur Wakely. Then you've got to be thinking about, well, how many businesses, how many shops have been in there? And I think that's the thing that's really interesting about this project. So as we come up to 2:30, we're going to be joined now by Tina. Tina's going to come back round and join me here. And what we're also going to do is I'm going to let Sophie Noon into our conversation. And Sophie is the High Street Heritage Action Zone project manager. So we'll just wait for her to join us and find out a little bit about, there she is. That's great. I'm sure she's been listening and watching some of the Facebook Live material and stuff like that. So you're on mute, Sophie. You're on mute yourself. There we go. So you're on mute as well. If you can unmute yourself. There we go. We can hear you now.
Great. So technical difficulties with my laptop, so I'm on my very old rusty iPhone, but hopefully great. I've been watching intently and been feeling inspired by James's speech, especially. It's been really, really interesting to hear more about the design season and how we can build that into what we're doing with Granby Street.
Yeah, I think this is one of the key things, isn't it? It's about partnership working and what all the constituent parts bring together in order to
especially how
work
different
around those
businesses
two
can
spaces.
work together to make sure that the whole area as a whole works as a destination. Because at the moment, Churchgate and Granby Street don't feel like places that people want to go to particularly. So if we can work with some of the partners that are involved to change that and to get them working in partnership in the same way that James has managed to improve the cultural quarter in the same way, then that'd be really good.
Okay, so Sophie, give us an update on where we are with the project at the moment. Have we got people coming forward for grant applications and stuff like that? You know, is it something we're going to physically see?
Yeah, there was quite a flurry of interest after the last Newsroom, which was the launch of the scheme. And I'm really pleased to say we've been working with property owners or businesses of 30 different spaces, more than 30 actually, to kind of look at whether we can help them with grant funding to see kind of how we can help support those places. So that includes quite a big grant application that's coming up for 31 Granby Street, which is the old Joseph Goddard Bank, where the Harry Krishna Centre is. So they're applying for funding at the end of this month to repair the roof, which will allow them to make the most of that amazing banking hall that they've got. And if anyone wants to go and see it, I know they're open tomorrow for the Heritage Open Days. So we're really excited about that one. The other big application we've got underway is for the Grand Hotel. So really excited to say that we've got the owners of the Grand Hotel on board, and we're working with them to completely redesign the ground floor shop units. So we'll be working with the existing businesses and trying to put it back as it would have been originally, which will completely uplift that whole part of Granby Street. So we're really excited about that too.
That's a fantastic project as well. Unfortunately, we were supposed to interview Sandy, the manager of the hotel, and Valeria, the architect who's working with them. But unfortunately, they couldn't coordinate their diaries so they could both be on. But we are very keen to catch up with them, find out a little bit about that project, and actually share that at the next Newsroom, which we're really, really excited about.
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, I'm sure we can give you an update at the next Newsroom. We've been working with lots of different businesses. There's been a lot of work going into getting the design right for these properties. So it's there's not much you can see on the ground at the moment. You've got Churchgate public realm works that are underway. You should be able to see the public realm works beginning in the next couple of months at the top of the Granby Street, which is going to pedestrianise that first bit by the train station, by the YMCA, which is going to make a big improvement to that area and make it much more welcoming, and hopefully see more people hang around there as a space that they want to use for lots of different groups. And then we've been invited by Historic England to bid for more money for our Heritage Action Zone, which is great. So they've invited us to bid for up to £500,000. And we're looking at different ways of delivering community engagement projects with that bid. So that'll be going in the next couple of weeks, and we'll keep you posted.
That's really, really good and great updates. I know we'd been in conversation with the guys at Seed, who are obviously going to be integral into supporting the local authority to kind of get that, submission together. So yeah, please do keep us updated. It'd be absolutely fantastic. But one of mine and John's, I would say, special element of last week was certainly getting to go inside one of the, I would say, Leicester's hidden gems, the wonderful timber warehouse, the timber yard that is down on Churchgate on the left-hand side. People probably wouldn't have actually, unless you look up and walk around the back of the book lane, you wouldn't even know it was there. But it is this big grey kind of Swiss looking building we have in our city centre, which the amazing Eleanor Mckevidy was so nice to talk to us about the history of the building, who made it, the story behind it, and actually gave us a bit of an insight into the work she was carrying out to kind of come up with possible alternative uses for that building as part of the project.
Yeah, so it's we think it's unique in the UK. We can't find any other examples quite like it. And if people want to have a look at it, it's just behind the Unitarian Chapel in Churchgate, and it just looks like a huge wooden shed, which it is essentially just that. It's just that single skin of timber, and we don't think it's been in use for maybe 40 years now. So it's really nice that through the Heritage Action Zone, we've been able to fund Eleanor Mckevidy and her team so they can do some proper research on it to find out kind of exactly what the options are for kind of taking it forward. And so we're excited to be working with the owners to find a solution for it.
Okay, now we made a short film when we went down there. It's a couple of minutes long, so we thought we'd show it now while you were on, because obviously this is one of the places that's going to kind of be brought back to life, if you like. That's not just on the high street as a shop or the Ishcon Centre, the former bank, but actually a building that's most people probably wouldn't even be aware of. So let me just share this, and then we'll just play this for a couple of minutes.
My name is Eleanor Mckevidy. I'm a conservation accredited architect, and I'm doing a feasibility study on a timber frame warehouse and other structures in 66 Churchgate. Well, the timber frame warehouse was built in 1881 by Thomas Brown, and not only did he have the timber frame warehouse, but he had his house built at the same time, which is in an arts and crafts style. The timber frame warehouse is a Grade 2 listed building, and as such has come to be highlighted as a building of significance, particularly by Leicester City Council and Historic England, and they've approved the funding of a feasibility study to see how it can be reused. I think it's very significant because I certainly, in my whole experience of being a conservation architect, have not seen anything like it. Particularly in a town centre, to have a timber frame warehouse is particularly special. What's also interesting is its history in the city is that it was taken to public inquiry when in the 70s they tried to demolish it because its significance was realised even then. And today, it may well stand the chance of receiving funding to bring it back into the community to gain use, perhaps potentially as an arts venue, a restaurant, who knows. The person who built the building and his house is associated with the building is Thomas Brown, and this site was actually owned by his father, Lawrence Brown, and they were timber merchants, they were carpenters, and they had a big yard. They employed about 5 or 6 people in that yard to, I suppose, repair buildings and build buildings within Leicester.
That was great.
It was brilliant.
Yeah.
It was fascinating to have a look around, actually, for something that you've seen, and then to go inside and, I mean, lots of pigeons in there staring at us, like, what do you want?
It was,
yeah, there's such atmosphere in there, isn't there? It's quite eerie, actually, when you go up into the top floors.
I think talking to Eleanor really made me understand just how important that building is in the city, and the only reason that is still in the state that it is, which is in really good condition for its age, is down to the skills and that those guys had, that family had. So when she was taking us around some of the original timbers and the structure that's actually holding up the timber frame warehouse, like the extent, I have never seen pieces of single wood that length. And she took us and showed us all the original marks. So the actual original beams that are in that building can be traced back right to the port where they came into the country. So, just fascinating. And the house itself, his actual original home, was just absolutely amazing to actually even get inside and have a look.
Yeah, and to think that it was so nearly lost in the 70s as well, it just goes to show how important council intervention is sometimes in making sure that these places are saved for future generations. So yeah, I'm glad you got to see it.
So what I really wanted to ask you as part of the newsroom, Sophie, was how do we get people to kind of, if there's people watching these interviews, how do they get involved in kind of saying, we'd like to become friends of Churchgate and Granby Street, we'd like to get involved in the Heritage Action Zone? How do we contribute our voice to help preserving, keeping these kind of buildings? What can we be doing in that space to kind of generate an interest and support to kind of say to Historic England, yes, we really do want to preserve this building?
Yeah, well, it's really important to get in touch. So people can email us at leicester.gov.uk, or I'd encourage them to fill in the survey as well, which is linked to this call. But yeah, we're really open-minded. We're obviously keen for there to be a legacy after this project. So the funding dries up in March 24, but we hope that the legacy goes on for years to come. Similarly with Greyfriars, we saw kind of a flurry of interest in the scheme, and then even now we're seeing Shoptree opening and kind of buildings being restored. So we're hoping to see the same effect in Granby Street and Churchgate.
Right. So Sophie, just to finish off, really, I want to talk about two things. One is this kind of hashtag Leicester Roots, where on the website you're encouraging people to help you kind of join the dots, if you like, for people that have lived and played, which I thought was a really interesting one. Lived, played and worked in the areas of Granby Street and Churchgate. And obviously there's a link that people can go on to tell you about how they can share their stories. But have you had anything come through at the moment about different families?
Yeah, we've had a really good response on Facebook via the museums and the Story of Leicester page, of people telling us about their drunken nights out in Churchgate and the various circus animals that were kept in the back of some of the pubs. There's been all sorts of stories that have come through. So we're looking at ways in which we can take some of those more interesting tales and bring them onto the streets. So hopefully in the next few months you'll see kind of posters and kind of banners and things that kind of highlight the history of the area and what it means to people. Yeah,
maybe we can have a particular section in one of the newsrooms, because I know we've got another newsroom, haven't we, in February, on the 16th of February.
Yeah.
Is there anything you particularly are looking for us to focus on with that? Is there a particular reason you picked that date?
Well, I'm hoping that we'll be just about starting on site with some of these bigger projects. So like the Grand Hotel and 31 Granby Street should be secured by then. We should have contractors ready to go, so we can find out a bit more about those projects. We'll also be looking at kind of the training aspect as well. So I know Tina spoke about this before, and with COVID, we haven't been able to do much on the ground so far, but we're hoping to have more kind of hands-on activities to deliver next year. We've just funded 8 local architects to do conservation accredited training with REBA. So at the moment, Eleanor Mckevidy is one of the only conservation experts who's an architect in Leicester. So we really want to make sure we've got a bigger pool of architects with that knowledge to work on these buildings in the future. So it's been really good to open up that scheme, and obviously we'll have 8 more experts to help us with these schemes in the future. So that's great. And obviously we've got the design season coming up as well, so we'll be able to feed back on that.
Great, and hopefully we'll catch up with the people from the Leicester Muir Hotel as well and talk to those guys, and we'll reach out to the Ishcon Centre as well, because we've mentioned them twice now in 2 newsrooms. So I think we need to start hearing from them, getting ready for their work that they're doing. I mean, from your perspective with the survey, let's leave on the end on the survey really. Is there a particular number that you have in mind that you'd like to get, or do you think any kind of engagement is useful for you when it comes to the gathering of evidence?
I think just kind of anybody who has something to say, I think it's important that they have the opportunity to do that, and I'm keen to kind of keep that open throughout the scheme. So it'd be nice to kind of look at kind of what people were saying at the beginning of the scheme and be able to compare that with what people are saying at the end. So yeah, and I don't have a particular number we're aiming for, but just kind of knowing that we've opened up the opportunity to people who have something they want to share with us or ideas for the scheme.
Okay, great. So my final point really is, are there opportunities as well for schools and colleges or university students to kind of get involved as well? I know, is it starting with filling out maybe the survey and saying that under the other they could be from a particular school, for example, or something that they're
that's a really good idea. And we actually had a meeting with Ishmael Dale from Historic England, who is the schools engagement officer for the region, earlier this week, and he gave us a few ideas that we're going to try and develop as part of the bid we're putting in the next couple of weeks. So yeah, early next year we should have some projects underway with schools.
Great. Well, we've done some work with Ishmael in the past, so maybe getting Ishmael on for a conversation would be quite good. Yeah, I think
that's a great idea.
It's a really vibrant community that you've created here of people that are interested in lots of different things, but actually the 2 streets are the things that kind of connect them together.
Yeah, people seem to share a vision for both areas, and slightly different visions for both areas. They've got a different character, but Granby Street, everyone agrees it should onto Granby Street, and different things to do and to enjoy Leicester from as soon as they get over the ring road basically. Yeah. And then Churchgate is a maker's space, trying to develop some of these huge empty spaces that are right in the city centre, and getting lots of artists and makers in will be a real benefit.
That's great. Well, thank you for taking the time to join us. And we'll bring the newsroom to an end now. Is there anything you want to mention anymore? No,
I just want to say, if anybody's joined us or they've just joined us and we're at the end of the newsroom, we'll be putting lots of links and the full newsroom interview out live after this. Please do take the time to complete the questionnaire, have your say, contribute to shaping what Granby Street and Churchgate are going to look like and what's going to be taking place there over the next few years. And get in touch if you've got a question, if you want to find out anything else about Heritage Action Zone, just drop us a line, message us, we can direct you via the right links, websites, and connecting you with the right people.
Check out the Leicester Heritage website, get onto the City Council website, send in an email, send in your stories to Leicester Roots, fill out the survey. Sophie made it very clear that we had to plug the survey throughout the whole newsroom, so hopefully we've done a good job on that. She's laughing.
Make sure you did too.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
See everybody in February. Bye.